She never spoke about her past, just fixed scopes, calibrated equipment, stayed invisible. The elite snipers barely noticed her until today. As they struggled to hit the 200-meter target, their mockery hung in the air. You ever touch a real rifle, Voss, or just clean them? When the emergency call pulled everyone away, she approached the abandoned Barrett 50 cal with practiced ease. Her transformation was instant, posture shifting, breathing controlled. One shot rang out. Direct hit. Impossible distance. The spotters froze. The returning snipers stared in disbelief. Major Blackwood was the only one who recognized her. My God, you're the ghost of Kandahar Ridge. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more untold tales of hidden heroes. The sun hadn't yet crested the jagged horizon of Blackwater Ridge when Talia Voss arrived at the range. Dawn was still just a promise in the east, painting the sky in watercolor shades of purple and amber. She preferred these quiet moments before everyone else arrived, when she could work in peace, when she could breathe without feeling watched. The air carried a bite of mountain chill as Talia moved through her morning ritual with practiced efficiency. Her duties as range technician were straightforward but precise. Check target sensors, calibrate optics, test wind meters, ensure the electronic scoring system was properly synchronized. In the 2 years she'd worked at the facility, she had developed a reputation for meticulous attention to detail, though few bothered to acknowledge it. She knelt beside a malfunctioning target sensor, her nimble fingers working to replace a damaged connection. The first rays of sunlight finally breached the mountaintops, casting long shadows across the valley floor. Talia squinted against the sudden brightness, her movements never faltering as she completed the repair. Another day in paradise, she murmured to herself, the rare sound of her own voice almost startling in the silence. The moment of solitude was shattered by the arrival of the first transport vehicles. Doors slammed, voices carried across the range, masculine, confident, loud. The elite sniper training unit of Blackwater Ridge had arrived for their morning qualification rounds. Talia kept her head down as boots crunched on the gravel pathway behind her. She didn't need to look to know who was approaching. Major Darius Blackwood's voice carried across the range as he briefed his team, his tone brooking no argument. Gentlemen and lady, he added with a perfunctory nod to Sergeant Octavia Fleming. Today's qualification will determine who represents us at the Allied Forces competition next month. I do not need to remind you of the expectations. Blackwater Ridge produces the finest longue distance marksmen in the world, and I expect nothing less than excellence from each of you. Fleming stood slightly apart from the group, her posture rigid. The only female sniper in the program, she had fought twice as hard to earn her place, and knew she'd have to fight twice as hard to keep it. Talia had never spoken more than a dozen words to her, but she recognized the look of someone determined to prove their worth. Lieutenant Zephyr Wells stepped forward, confidence radiating from every inch of his 6 feet 2 inches frame. With wavy blonde hair that somehow always looked perfectly styled despite regulations and striking blue eyes, Wells was both the facility's golden boy and its most arrogant presence. "What's the course record again, sir?" he asked with a smirk, knowing full well the answer. Major Blackwood's mouth tightened. "You hold it, Lieutenant. 1,500 meters with a 15 MP crosswind." "Just checking," Wells replied, his grin widening as he glanced at his fellow snipers. "Wanted to make sure I had the right target to beat today." Talia kept her focus on her work, moving from the target sensor to the next station where she needed to calibrate Lieutenant Wells' scope. She could feel him watching as she approached his assigned position, his expensive custom rifle laid out with precision. "Careful with that, Voss," Well said, watching her hands with undisguised suspicion. "That scope costs more than you make in a year." "Yes, sir," Talia replied softly, her voice barely audible as she made a minute adjustment he hadn't noticed was needed. Wells hovered over her as she worked, his presence deliberately intimidating. When she finished and moved a step away, he picked up the rifle and checked it himself, as if expecting to find fault with her work. Finding none, he turned to his colleagues. "Support staff these days," he said loudly enough for Talia to hear. "Remember when range techs actually knew something about ballistics?" The other snipers laughed, a few casting apologetic glances her way, but none speaking up. Talia's expression remained neutral, her movements economical as she gathered her tools and moved to the next station. Only someone watching very closely would have noticed the slight tightening around her eyes, the momentary pause in her breathing. Her gaze drifted briefly to the far end of the range, where a Barrett .50 caliber rifle sat in its case. The heavy artillery of the sniper world capable of engaging targets at extraordinary distances. Something flickered across her face. An unreadable emotion quickly suppressed. As she knelt to adjust a wind meter, her hands trembled slightly, the first crack in her composed exterior. A memory flashed unbidden. Darkness, the weight of a rifle against her shoulder, someone whispering in her ear, "Breathe. Just breathe." She pushed the thought away with practiced determination, focusing instead on the task before her. Later, as she repaired a broken target sensor, snippets of conversation drifted to her from a group of snipers taking a break nearby. "Fleming's not bad for a woman," one said, casting a glance at the female sergeant practicing her breathing technique some distance away. "But she'll never make that 2,000-meter shot consistently. It's just physics. Better than the civilian help." Wells laughed, catching Talia's eye deliberately. "Hey, Voss," he called out. "You ever even touch a real rifle, or just clean them?" Talia looked up briefly, her gray eyes giving nothing away. "Just clean them, sir," she answered quietly before returning to her work. The morning progressed with qualification rounds at various distances. Talia moved between stations, making adjustments, recording data, and maintaining equipment with silent efficiency. She was a ghost at the edge of their awareness, present, but unseen, heard, but not listened to. By midday, the range buzzed with an entirely different energy. Word had spread that a delegation of foreign military attaches would be arriving to observe American training methods. Major Blackwood had ordered everything to be immaculate, every procedure flawless. "This is a diplomatic opportunity," he reminded his team during their lunch break. "These observers represent potential allies and training partners. I want them impressed not just by our results, but by our professionalism." Talia worked through her break, ensuring every piece of equipment was functioning at optimal levels. She was checking the last wind meter when the delegation arrived. A group of 6 officers from European and Asian allied nations, escorted by a State Department liaison. Major Blackwood greeted them with practiced charm, gesturing broadly at the impressive facility. "Welcome to Blackwater Ridge, gentlemen. Our program produces the finest long distance marksmen in the world, and today you'll see exactly why." The demonstration started well. The Blackwater snipers hit their marks with impressive consistency at 800 m, then down 200. Each successful shot was met with polite nods from the observers who took notes and occasionally whispered among themselves. But when they moved to the 1,800-meter range, problems arose. The wind had picked up, swirling unpredictably through the valley in patterns that changed by the minute. What had been a steady crosswind became a complex, shifting challenge. Lieutenant Wells missed his first shot. His second struck the outer edge of the target rather than the center mass. His expression darkened with each unsuccessful attempt. "Something's wrong with this scope," he announced loudly, face flushing. "Voss," he barked. "Get over here and fix this." Talia approached calmly, taking the rifle with practiced care. She examined it thoroughly, checking the scope mount, the barrel, and making a tiny adjustment before handing it back. "There was nothing wrong with the calibration, sir," she said quietly. "The wind patterns in this valley create a corkscrew effect at this time of day. If you adjust for the primary wind direction, you still need to account for the vertical shift as the bullet travels the full distance." Well stared at. Her momentarily speechless at receiving actual advice from someone he considered little more than equipment maintenance. "I know how to shoot," he snapped, snatching the rifle back. "Just do your job and let me do mine." His next shot missed again, this time by a wider margin. The foreign attaches exchanged glances, their expressions carefully neutral, but their attention clearly waning. Major Blackwood's jaw clenched visibly. "Perhaps we should move to something more achievable," suggested the British liaison diplomatically. "These conditions are particularly challenging today." Blackwood's pride wouldn't allow him to concede. "Actually, gentlemen, we have something special prepared, the ultimate test of skill and technology." He pointed to a barely visible target positioned on a distant ridge. "That target is exactly 3,200 m away, beyond the effective range of most snipers, but not mine. The delegation perked up with renewed interest. Highly ambitious, commented the German attaché. Our programs rarely attempt shots beyond 2,500 meters, even in ideal conditions. Lieutenant Wells holds our course record, Blackwood continued. He'll demonstrate what American training and technology can accomplish. Wells stepped up to the firing line, now under immense pressure. He settled behind his rifle, taking extra time to prepare for the unprecedented shot. When he finally fired, the bullet flew wide, not even close to the distant target. Wind shift, he explained tersely, reloading for a second attempt. That shot also missed, as did his third. One by one, the other snipers tried their luck, including Sergeant Fleming, who came closest, but still missed by a significant margin. The foreign observers grew restless, checking watches, whispering among themselves. What had been intended as a showcase was becoming an embarrassment. Wells' frustration mounted visibly. After his third miss, he slammed the rifle down on the shooting bench, narrowly missing Talia's hand as she adjusted a nearby wind meter. This equipment is garbage, he snarled. No wonder we can't hit anything with this tech. Checking our gear. Talia said nothing, simply stepping back as Wells stormed off toward the facility building. But Sergeant Fleming noticed something. The way Talia's eyes tracked the wind indicators, the slight tilt of her head as she calculated something no one else seemed to see. Fleming hesitated, seeming about to approach Talia when an emergency call came through on the facility's communication system. Security alert at East Entrance, announced a tense voice. Unidentified vehicle attempting unauthorized access. All security personnel report immediately. Major Blackwood straightened. Gentlemen, please excuse this interruption. Standard procedure requires my attention. We'll resume the demonstration shortly. He turned to his team. All security cleared personnel with me. Equipment stays in place. We'll continue when I return. The range emptied quickly with even the foreign delegates being escorted to a secure area as a precaution. Within minutes, only a skeleton crew remained. 2 spotters manning the observation equipment and Talia, who began quietly cleaning up the abandoned stations. At the firing line, the Barrett 50 caliber rifle sat unattended, still pointed toward the impossible 3,200-meter target. As the sound of departing vehicles faded into the distance, Talia paused in her work, looking out across the vast expanse of the valley to the barely visible target. For a long moment, she stood motionless, her expression unreadable. Then, with a glance to confirm the spotters were occupied with their equipment, she approached the Barrett with quiet purpose. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Blackwater Ridge as Talia methodically organized the abandoned equipment. With most personnel responding to the security alert, the range was unnaturally quiet. Only 2 spotters remained, occupied with their equipment at the far end of the firing line. Talia paused beside the Barrett 50 caliber rifle, her reflection ghost-like in its polished barrel. For a moment, she simply stared at it, something shifting in her normally impassive expression. She glanced toward the spotters, then at her watch. With deliberate calm, she set down her cleaning supplies and moved behind the weapon. Her hands hovered over it for a moment, hesitating as if crossing an invisible line. Then, with fluid confidence that seemed to transform her entire being, Talia took position behind the rifle. Her body language changed completely, shoulders relaxed, but firm, cheek welding perfectly to the stock, breathing pattern shifting to the controlled rhythm of a professional marksman. Gone was the invisible technician, replaced by someone entirely different, yet somehow more authentic. Without adjusting the scope settings Wells had left, she made only the slightest modification to the stock position. Her finger caressed the trigger guard momentarily before taking proper position. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she calculated wind speed, distance, and bullet drop with practiced precision. One of the spotters noticed her and straightened up. "Hey, what are you doing with that weapon?" he called, already moving in her direction. Talia didn't respond. She took a deep breath, held it halfway, and squeezed the trigger with perfect control. The Barrett roared, its massive recoil handled expertly by Talia's positioned body. The sound echoed through the valley like thunder. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity as the bullet traveled the impossible distance. Then came the unmistakable ring of metal on metal carried clearly across the range. Despite the 3,200-meter distance, the spotters scrambled for their observation scopes. Direct hit, one whispered in disbelief. Center mass. That's impossible at this range with these conditions. The other grabbed the log book. Who took that shot? Wells Fleming. They must have come back. It was her, the first spotter said, pointing at Talia, who was already standing. Professional distance returned to her expression. The technician. She just hit a target our best snipers couldn't touch. The commotion brought personnel running back to the range, including Lieutenant Wells and Sergeant Fleming, who had been nearby when they heard the distinctive sound of the Barrett firing. What happened? Who fired? Wells demanded, then stopped short when he saw Talia standing behind his Barrett. Did you touch my rifle? He asked, voice dangerous and low. Before Talia could answer, the spotter interrupted. Sir, someone just hit the 3D 200-meter target. Impossible, Wells scoffed. Who? All eyes turned to Talia. You? Wells' face contorted in disbelief. That's absurd. She's just a technician. Sergeant Fleming moved to the spotting scope and confirmed the hit herself. She turned to Talia with new eyes. Where did you learn to shoot like that? The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted them as Major Blackwood returned with the foreign delegates. Seeing the commotion, he hurried over. What's happening here? He demanded. Sir, Fleming reported professional despite her shock. The 3D 200-meter target has been hit. By whom? Blackwood's eyebrows rose in surprise. The spotter pointed silently at Talia. Blackwood looked at her, confusion evident on his face. Then something changed in his expression as he studied her features more carefully, seeing past the deliberately plain appearance and quiet demeanor. My God, he said softly. You're Talia Voss, aren't you? The ghost of Kandahar Ridge. The foreign delegates murmured among themselves, recognition spreading across their faces. Who is she, sir? Fleming asked, looking between them. Blackwood's posture had changed completely, a new respect evident in his stance. 8 years ago, a classified operation in Afghanistan went sideways. An entire platoon was pinned down by enemy forces, certain to be overrun. Their location was 3,500 meters from the nearest friendly position, beyond the range of effective fire support. He looked directly at Talia now. A single sniper made an impossible shot at 3,500 meters, taking out the enemy commander and allowing the platoon to escape. That shot saved 27 American lives and still stands as the longest confirmed kill by an American sniper. Due to the classified nature of the operation, the sniper's identity was never revealed publicly. They called her the Ghost. Wells stared at Tia in disbelief. That's not possible. She's just the range tech. After that operation, Blackwood continued. The sniper disappeared from active service, changed her name, took a civilian position. He addressed Talia directly. We thought you were dead. I prefer it that way, sir. Talia replied quietly, speaking more words at once than most had ever heard from her. The British attaché stepped forward. Miss Voss, your shot at Kandahar Ridge is studied in sniper schools across NATO. Many believe it to be apocryphal, a story exaggerated by time and retelling. Yet here you are. Talia remained expressionless, though her posture had subtly shifted. She no longer seemed to be trying to disappear. Why are you working as a technician? Fleming asked, voicing the question everyone was thinking. For a long moment, Talia was silent. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but clear. Because it was quiet, she said simply. Because no one asked questions. Wells looked as though he'd been struck. All this time you've been listening to us brag about 1,500-meter shots when you've hit targets more than twice that distance. You're good shooters, Talia said. All of you. Your techniques are solid. But you could have taught us, Fleming pressed. You could have been an instructor, not a technician. Talia's gaze drifted to the distant mountains. That wasn't what I wanted. Major Blackwood dismissed the stunned spotters with a gesture, then turned to the foreign delegates. Gentlemen, would you mind giving us a moment technical discussion? The delegates nodded, understanding the subtext, and moved away with their State Department escort. When they were out of earshot, Blackwood faced Talia directly. Why here, he asked. Of all places, why come to a sniper training facility if you wanted to leave that life behind? Talia's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Because I understand the equipment, the physics, the mathematics. It was familiar without being the same. And you never intended to pick up a rifle again? She shook her head. No. Then why today? Fleming asked. Talia considered the question carefully before answering. Because you were all trying so hard. Because I knew I could make the shot. Because sometimes knowing you can do something, but choosing not to feels worse than doing it. Wells had been uncharacteristically quiet, staring at the distant target through a spotting scope. He finally turned to Talia. Would you show me how you did it? Not just the shot, but how you read the wind patterns. Before she could answer, Blackwood intervened. Lieutenant Specialist Voss is not here as an instructor. Her presence and identity remain classified. With respect, sir, Fleming interjected. We just watched her make a shot none of us could make. There's knowledge there that could save lives. Blackwood studied Fleming, then Wells, before turning back to Talia. It's your decision. Your identity is still protected by classification protocols. You can walk away right now. And officially, this never happened, or you can choose to share what you know on your terms. Talia looked at each of them in turn, her gaze lingering on the foreign delegates in the distance. What's really going on here, sir? She asked Blackwood directly. This isn't a standard demonstration for foreign attaches. Too many high-ranking officers for a routine visit. Blackwood's expression grew serious. You're right. There's a joint operation being planned. Multiple NATO countries, high V-value target in extremely difficult terrain. We need the best. We've been trying to find someone who can make the shot that will be required. And you couldn't tell them about me because officially I don't exist, Talia concluded. Correct. But now they've seen what you can do. Talia was silent for a long moment. I'm not going back into the field, she finally said. That part of my life is over. No one's asking you to, Blackwood assured her. But your knowledge, your expertise could mean the difference between success and failure, between life and death for the operators who will be deployed. The weight of the decision was visible in Talia's expression. She had spent years hiding, becoming invisible, leaving behind the person she had been. Yet here she was, holding a rifle again, her skill undeniable. I'll help with the training, she said at last. Nothing more. Relief washed over Blackwood's face. Thank you. Wells shifted uncomfortably. I owe you an apology, he said to Talia. The things I said, how I treated you, not knowing who you were. You treated me exactly as I wanted to be treated, Talia replied, invisible. Still, Wells insisted I was wrong. And I'd be grateful to learn from you if you're willing to teach. Sergeant Fleming nodded in agreement. We all would. As the sun began to set over Blackwater Ridge, casting the valley in golden light, Talia looked at the group surrounding her. For years, she had chosen solitude and anonymity. She had buried her skills and her past, becoming a ghost in plain sight. Now, with a single shot, she had revealed herself. There was no going back to the shadows. The first thing you need to understand about extreme long-range shooting, she began, her voice stronger than they had ever heard it, is that you're not just calculating a trajectory, you're predicting the future, you're accounting for every variable that will affect that bullet during its flight time. Wells and Fleming listened intently as Talia described how she had read the complex wind patterns in the valley, how she had accounted for temperature, barometric pressure, and even the rotation of the Earth. As darkness fell, Major Blackwood invited the foreign delegates to join them. They gathered around Talia, asking technical questions about the legendary shot at Kandahar Ridge that she answered with quiet precision. The British attaché studied her with renewed respect. Ms. Voss, your shot today and your past accomplishments are extraordinary. Would you consider consulting with our program? Strictly advisory, of course. Before Talia could respond, Blackwood intervened. Specialist Voss has agreed to assist with training for the joint operation. Beyond that, her involvement will be at her discretion. Of course, the attaché nodded. The offer remains open. As the group dispersed for the evening, Lieutenant Wells lingered behind. Why didn't you ever correct us? He asked. All those times we talked down to you treated you like you were beneath us. Why just take it? Talia looked past him to the distant mountains now mere silhouettes against the darkening sky. Because that shot at Kandahar saved those soldiers. Yes, but there were complications. Civilian casualties that weren't supposed to happen. An investigation. Politics. She shook her head. I didn't want to be that person anymore. Wells struggled visibly with this new reality. I still owe you an apology. You owe me nothing, Talia replied. But if you want to learn, I'm willing to teach. As dusk settled over the range, the atmosphere had transformed completely. The foreign delegates clustered around Talia, asking technical questions about the legendary shot at Kandahar Ridge that she answered with quiet precision. Though her responses remained concise, there was a new confidence in her voice. a subtle authority that had been carefully concealed before. Lieutenant Wells stood apart from the group, face cycling through a range of emotions. Disbelief had given way to embarrassment, which was now evolving into reluctant admiration. Finally, he approached Talia as the crowd thinned. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "All this time, we treated you like someone beneath notice." "Like someone beneath notice?" Talia finished for him, no malice in her tone. "It was easier that way." "But why?" Talia looked past him to the distant mountains. "That shot at Kandahar saved those soldiers." "Yes, but there were complications. Civilian casualties that weren't supposed to happen. An investigation politics." She shook her head. "I didn't want to be that person anymore." Wells struggled visibly with this new reality. "I owe you an apology." "You owe me nothing," Talia replied. "You treated me exactly as I wanted to be treated." Invisible. Sergeant Fleming joined them, offering Talia a bottle of water. "So all this time while we've been strutting around breaking course records at 1,500 m, you could have outshot us all blindfolded." "You've all been doing fine work," Talia said. "The program produces excellent snipers. But you could have been teaching us," Fleming pressed, "sharing what you know instead of just fixing our equipment." Major Blackwood approached with purpose, the foreign delegates having finally departed for the evening. "Specialist Voss, or whatever name you prefer now, I'd like to make you an offer." His tone was respectful, a complete departure from his previous interactions with her. "We need someone with your expertise as an instructor. Not just your shooting skills, but your understanding of environmental factors, your technical knowledge, the kind of experience that can't be found in any manual." Talia hesitated, her expression guarded. "Sir, I left that life behind for a reason." "I understand that," Blackwood nodded. "And I respect it. But teaching isn't the same as doing. These men and women deserve the best training possible. Training only you can provide." Talia looked around at the faces watching her. Wells is embarrassed. Respect. Fleming's open admiration, the spotters' awe. For the first time since arriving at Blackwater Ridge, she felt truly seen. "I'll consider it," she said finally. "But I have conditions." "Name them," Blackwood replied without hesitation. "My identity remains protected. No publicity, no records connecting me to Kandahar. And I choose what I teach and how I teach it." "Agreed," Blackwood said immediately. As they discussed the details, Wells stepped away, clearly still processing the day's revelations. Fleming watched him go before turning back to Talia. "He's taking it hard," she observed, finding out he's not the best shooter on the range. "Everyone has their strengths," Talia replied. "Wells has exceptional instincts under pressure. That's something you can't teach." Fleming studied her with new eyes. "You've been watching us all this time, haven't you? Analyzing our techniques, our habits. It's hard not to notice patterns when you see the same mistakes repeated," Talia admitted. "And what's my weakness?" Fleming asked directly. Talia considered her answer carefully. "You overthink, second guesses yourself. Your first instinct is usually correct, but you don't trust it yet." Fleming nodded slowly, absorbing the assessment. "Thank you for being honest." As darkness fell over the range, the group dispersed to prepare for the next day's training. Talia remained behind, standing alone at the firing position where she had revealed her true self after years of hiding. She ran her hand along the Barrett's barrel, a complex emotion crossing her face. "Hard to let go completely, isn't it?" Major Blackwood's voice came from behind her. Talia didn't turn. "I thought I had." "Some skills become part of who you are," he said, moving to stand beside her. "They can't be unlearned. I didn't want to be defined by what I could do with a rifle. And yet, here you are." Talia finally looked at him. "Here I am." "For what it's worth," Blackwood said quietly. "What happened at Kandahar Ridge wasn't your fault. The intelligence was flawed. No one could have known about the civilians." "I knew something was wrong," Talia countered. "The positioning didn't make sense. I should have questioned the order. And those 27 soldiers would have died." Blackwood's voice was firm but gentle. "You made the call you had to make with the information you had." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as the last light faded from the sky. "The offer stands," Blackwood said finally. "Think about it overnight. Whatever you decide, I'll support it." He left her alone with her thoughts and the quiet of the mountains. The following morning, Talia arrived at the range before dawn as always. But this time was different. This time, she knew she wouldn't be invisible. As the sun crested the horizon, she found the entire sniper team waiting for her, standing at attention. Major Blackwood stepped forward. Have you considered my offer? Talia nodded slowly. I have conditions, no publicity, no special treatment, and I choose what I teach and how I teach it. Agreed, Blackwood said immediately, relief evident in his expression. When would you like to start? Before Talia could answer, Lieutenant Wells approached, holding his personal rifle, a custom-built precision instrument he normally allowed no one else to touch. Would you mind taking a look at this? He asked, offering it to her. I think the cheek weld needs adjustment, but I'd value your opinion. The gesture wasn't lost on Talia. This wasn't just about a rifle adjustment. It was an acknowledgement, a peace offering, an admission that he had something to learn from her. She accepted the rifle, examining it with expert hands. It's a beautiful weapon, she acknowledged. The balance is nearly perfect, but yes, the cheek weld could use some work. The stock length is also a bit short for your frame. It's affecting your recoil management. Wells nodded, taking in her assessment without the defensiveness that would have characterized his response just a day earlier. Can you show me how to adjust it correctly? As Talia began explaining the modification, the other snipers gathered around. Sergeant Fleming watched with a smile. Will you show us how you account for the corkscrew wind effect? She asked. I've been struggling with that for months. For the first time in years, Talia felt something like peace as she began to explain techniques she had developed years ago and kept to herself ever since. The key is to understand that wind doesn't move in a single direction, she began, her voice stronger and more confident than any of them had ever heard. You need to visualize its movement through the entire bullet path. In valleys like this one, you have multiple currents affecting the trajectory at different points. She led them to a whiteboard in the range briefing area and began sketching wind patterns, explaining concepts that went far beyond standard training. The snipers listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking questions that revealed both their expertise and the gaps in their knowledge. As the morning progressed, Talia found herself falling naturally into the role of instructor. Years of silent observation had given her insight into each sniper's individual strengths and weaknesses, allowing her to tailor her guidance accordingly. Wells, you're anticipating the recoil, she noted as she watched him practice. Trust the weapon, let it surprise you. To Fleming, stop checking the wind flag so frequently. Make your assessment, commit to it, and then focus entirely on your breathing and trigger control. By midday, the dynamic at the range had shifted completely. Snipers who had barely acknowledged Talia's existence now sought her advice, listened intently to her observations, and implemented her suggestions with immediate results. Major Blackwood observed from a distance, a satisfied expression on his face. The British attaché approached him, speaking quietly. Remarkable transformation, he noted, both in her and in your team. She was always remarkable, Blackwood replied. We just failed to see it. My offer stands, the attaché said. We would value her expertise in our program as well. That will be entirely her decision, Blackwood answered. But I suspect she's found her place here, at least for now. As the day wound down, Talia found herself alone at the range once more, making final adjustments to equipment that now seemed different under her hands. No longer just tools she maintained, but extensions of the knowledge she had begun to share. Lieutenant Wells approached, his usual confidence tempered by a new humility. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, he began, about why you didn't correct us when we talked down to you. Talia waited, letting him find his words. I want you to know that I respect your choice to step away from active service, and I respect what you're doing now, sharing what you know. It takes different kinds of courage. Thank you, Talia said simply. Would you be willing to tell me more about Kandahar Ridge someday? Wells asked. Not for gossip or war stories, but because I think there are lessons there that could save lives. Talia considered his request. Someday, she agreed, when it's easier to talk about. As the sun began to set on her first day as an instructor, Talia watched the snipers pack up their equipment with a new sense of purpose. For years, she had chosen invisibility as protection against a past she couldn't change. But perhaps there was another way forward. Not by forgetting who she had been, but by using that experience to shape who others might become. The following morning, Talia arrived at the range before dawn as always. But this time, everything was different. She carried not just her tool kit, but also a weathered notebook filled with observations and calculations from her years of experience. As the sniper team arrived, there was no awkwardness, no hesitation in how they greeted her. The transformation was complete. She was no longer just the range technician, but Talia Voss, the ghost of Kandahar Ridge, whose knowledge they now eagerly sought. "I thought we might start with environmental reading today," she announced as they gathered around. "By what the instruments tell you, learning to feel the wind before it happens." The snipers nodded, ready to learn. Sergeant Fleming stepped forward with a question about bullet spin drift at extreme distances. Lieutenant Wells added a point about temperature variations affecting powder burn rates. As Talia began explaining concepts that went far beyond standard training manuals, she felt a weight lifting that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. For the first time in years, she was using all of her mind, all of her expertise. She was whole again. The Barrett 50 cal that had revealed her true identity now sat beside her, not as a weapon, but as a tool for passing on knowledge that might one day save lives, not by taking them, as she once had, but by preparing others for the moment when such skills would be needed. And if anyone at Blackwater Ridge wondered where Talia Voss had learned to shoot with such extraordinary skill, they no longer had to ask. They simply had to watch and listen as she finally stepped out of the shadows and into the role she had been born to fill.